Welcome to Our Voices. Accidents, sickness, diseases, wars, and other factors can cause any of us to be physically disabled. In sub-Saharan Africa, an estimate of 80 million people are living with disabilities. Many of these women and men can and want to be productive members of societies, but they face more obstacles than their physical limitations. On today's program, we'll talk about how people living with disabilities can gain greater access to life's basic necessities and opportunities. Hi, I'm Orion Itangi-Shaka.
And I am Hadiza Kiari.
Hello there, I'm Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick.
And I'm Ayan Bior. Nigeria passed a new ambitious law protecting persons with disabilities, demanding sweeping changes that ban discrimination while making accessibility a priority. But those changes won't come overnight. And in fact, it could take years for Nigerians to see the impact of this new law, leaving over 27 million disabled Nigerians without access to public facilities until the law catches up to their demands. Here's my report.
For decades, Nigeria was one of dozens of countries on the continent without a law protecting the rights of persons with disabilities. That changed on January 23rd, when President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act into law. A victory in a long-fought battle for activists and persons with disabilities.
Truly, for many years, I haven't been the only one chasing this bill. It's all of us, all the leaders of the disabled people in all the states.
The 27-page bill makes several promises, including a mandate to provide access to public buildings, roads, and sidewalks, as well as protection against employment discrimination. But it gives the public 5 years to comply, a transitory period that may prove challenging for millions living in an inaccessible Nigeria.
Public infrastructure in Nigeria is another, let me call it, a hell to persons with disability. It's another hell of its sort to persons with disability. Ranging from your school, you can imagine as a person with disability, you're going to lectures in a 4-story building. You can imagine you want to access probably a bank, you want to access hospital, you want to access places of worship, you want to access, there's no provision for ramp for you to come in.
According to Nigeria's Center for Citizens with Disabilities, 98% of public structures and facilities are not handicap accessible. For the first time during a visit to the United States, Nigerian disability rights activist Grace Jerry got to experience what life could be like in a country where the needs of persons with disabilities are reflected in the laws.
When I got here to America, I have never felt free, for the past 13 years like I felt, when I came here. Because the access, my goodness, anywhere you go to, you find a ramp that's connected to the walkway, linking you to the next street, linking you to the next mall, linking you to anywhere you want to go to. And looking at this, I kept thinking about my country, Nigeria, like, oh my goodness, we can achieve this in Nigeria. We can make this happen.
That access is the result of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which became law in 1990. It made discrimination against people with disabilities in employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services illegal, transforming the lives of millions of Americans.
Yes, we can change the world. It starts from somewhere. It starts from Africa. It starts from us. It starts from me.
The world is full of Africa. Yes, we can.
Nigeria's law is a milestone for rights activists and the disability community in the country. But while protecting people with disabilities in Nigeria is now a legal order, the challenges of enforcing the law will play a role in its effectiveness.
It's really interesting to see additional countries on the continent taking major steps in trying to better the lives of the disabled. It's really encouraging. Nigeria is joining different other countries, as you know, Kenya, South Africa, and I believe Ghana also, and several other countries that are actually passing bills that are different from the regular provisions that we see in different countries that already have provisions in their constitution and things like that. I mean, efforts like this are actually reinforcing some of the regional efforts that we see, like on the African Union, when recently last year they passed the African Disability Protocol. It was signed on January 31st, and this protocol is actually meant to reinforce and to ensure the rights of the disabled people on the continent. And member states of the African Union have signed to this. But I think that political will, as well as resources towards these bills, is actually going to be the driving force of what we're going to see if these bills and these laws are going to make impact into actually everyday lives of the disabled on the continent.
Yeah, I think that's right. And as I was reporting for this story, one of the first things that I learned is that Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, is only 2% accessible for persons with disabilities. So that generated a lot of questions in my mind. And so I decided to look up the actual act. And you can find it online as well. It's pretty comprehensive. It sets expectations to the public, and it establishes the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and it sets fees for businesses that don't comply. But I think that the most important thing that this act did is it put power directly into the hands of persons with disabilities. Because now with this law, persons with disabilities can sue businesses that discriminate against them on the basis of their disability. And I think that giving someone legal redress is a very important way to empower them. Now, it's not in this law. Well, it's not really clear how the government plans to implement the law, which really worries me.
Yeah, right, so that all our laws don't just become acts.
That's right. I do congratulate Nigeria, but I'm just thinking, you know, is this going to be implemented by the Education Ministry or the Health Ministry? How is it going to work?
Well, I can tell you that the Ministry of Information is responsible for disseminating the information in this law, and that's really important.
Yes. Okay.
I feel like we cannot talk about disability without mentioning the ADA Act. Americans with Disability, which was passed in 1990. So the bill pretty much protects persons who are disabled, and it not only does that, but it also ensures that structures, buildings are compliant with the ADA, ramps, elevators, and so on.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that this law really transformed the structure of America, but what it really did is helped end the stigma that people with disabilities did, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, America definitely set the pace, and I have to give them kudos for that. As far as Nigeria, I definitely completely agree with you. It is a huge achievement, and I hope that it ushers in a new norm, because Nigeria is, as you know, it's a country that has approximately 27 million people with disability.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Right, and most of them are more or less have become more or less destitute due to societal neglect, and in some cases it is seen as a curse to even have a disability. So people tend to resort to begging on the streets just to survive. So while I do applaud the Nigerian government for signing this elaborate bill, on the other hand, I haven't seen anything that shows that the government is doing anything to eradicate people roaming around. There's nothing as far as jobs or even providing them with accommodation. So I really hope the Nigerian government is listening and will do something.
27 million people, those are voters, potentially.
Yeah, they are
it's
voters.
like more like 3 Burundis put together.
Yes, and then the other thing I would like to mention is that it's one thing to sign a bill, it's another to actually implement that bill. So if, we know that most African countries have been plagued with corruption, and what that means is that the wealthy, they might feel like they can step on, go against the rules and not be held accountable. But I have hopes, and I hope that they will make things happen.
You're a very optimistic individual. I wish we could see more acts, but also more action. I'm all for legal requirements and the incentivizing businesses to hire people with disabilities. I'm all for quota systems. Great. But it's got to be more than that. How about hiring people not just in spite of their disability or because they have a disability just to fill a quota, but actually hiring them because it's good for your business to bring their skills on board, to tap into their perspectives. And, people with disabilities will tell you, they have a special knack for problem solving because they've got to do it every single day of their lives as they have to navigate a world that just isn't designed for them to thrive. I really like something very interesting that I read recently. Professor Matilda Niehaus is a woman who studies disabilities and the workplace. She's from the University of Cologne in Germany. And I like this suggestion that she has about one way to really mainstream people into the work environment is to create representative bodies.
She means like a union kind of thing?
Right. You'd have a shop steward at the office, a body that will really ensure that the workplace and the way business is conducted is shaped in such a way that people can thrive. It is make sure that not only for those who have disabilities, but for people who could become physically challenged or disabled at any point. And I think that goes a long way to making sure that people are not just employed, but that they're empowered as well, and that they can see their way into leadership roles. You know, we are women of color from Africa. We know what it is like to fight in the workplace for equality and for justice. And this kind of is along those, we know the struggle, and this is kind of along those same lines.
I agree. And when you talk about thriving as a mother, I think about the education system and what opportunities that children can have, you know, to the degree in which they can, you know, if they have a disability. I mean, I think that we know that the governments on the continent, most of them, the responsibility of education falls on them. And so if accommodation for disabled children cannot be made for the regular school system, I think that regional schools should at least be the solution. I mean, I think when I've been reporting about a school called Suffice in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, it's an impressive school that has actually the classroom being mixed, children with disabilities and children who don't have disabilities, and actually having them together.
So you mean both the able and disabled being in the same class? Don't you think that could lead to bullying?
Well, some critics do ask about that, but I think that when I'm talking to the director, she feels very strongly that the children don't even see the disabilities. Children at a very young age don't have that kind of mentality. They don't see the disability among each other.
In South Africa, there's a new political party on the scene, and they're going to be contesting the election in May. They're called the African People with Disabilities Movement, and they think they stand a real chance at the polls.
For presidency?
Well, you know, they'll be contesting the election, but I think the idea is really to get a seat in Parliament, to win a seat or two. And if they do win a seat or two in Parliament, that would be fantastic, because it puts them in a position where they can actually play a role in crafting legislation. They can be on oversight committees and help set policy.
Well, I wonder if this is what Ghana needs, because they passed their Anti-Discrimination Act for persons with disabilities in 2006, but people are complaining that the act has not done anything at all. So I wonder if this same political fervor is what's needed.
A political party gives visibility unlike anything, you know, anything else. And we also want to hear what you have to say. Go to social media and tell us. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tell us what you think about the perceptions around people with disabilities. Our handle there is VOA Our Voices, and we've got videos and updates there for you. Be sure to share our posts and our pages with your friends and followers.
Also, don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Our Voices.
Remember, we're on WhatsApp too, so send us your messages and videos as you always do. Our number is US country code +1 304 506 3638. So reach out to us and add your voice to this conversation.
And we want to remind you that you are the fifth person on this panel, and it's time for your voices to be heard. Here's what some of you have to say about living with disabilities in Africa. We'll be right back.
We still have a long way to go, because a lot of the places are not accessible at all. There are buildings in this country that are over 2 floors, and you have to walk up the stairs. There are buildings which do not have ramps. There are buildings which do not even have toilets for people with disabilities.
It's important that families support and encourage the disabled children. They have a very important role to play in encouraging them to go to school or find work, etc. With family support, disabled people can succeed like anyone else. At the same time, families who have disabled children need to support them with information about disabilities. This is because some families have misconceptions about disability. For example, in my native country, Burundi, some families believe that a child with disability brings bad luck in the family. This is a myth.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. Yetnebersh Ngusi lost her sight at the age of 5, but she hasn't let her disability slow her down. A tireless advocate for people with disabilities in Ethiopia, she just won the prestigious Spirit of Helen Keller Award. Ngusi recently spoke to VOA's Salam Solomon about her childhood and her life's work from our studios in New York.
Growing up in the rural province of Wallo, Ethiopia, Yetnebersh Ngusi was thought to have little prospects for success in life after she became blind as a result of meningitis.
Becoming blind was like quite so many people meant for my mom that, oh my gosh, it's going to be end of her life. She can only live until you're alive.
But where others saw obstacles, she saw opportunity.
Had I not been blind, I would have been early married, like at the age of 10 or 12. So I always called that being blind was my emancipator. That way it gave me the path to education and brought me to where I am today.
While other young girls were married off as child brides or forced to work at home, she was allowed to devote herself to learning. She moved to the capital, Addis Ababa, and pursued education, eventually earning a law degree. She went on to form a group, the Ethiopian Center for Disability and Development, that advocates for the rights of the disabled in her home country. Yetnebersh isn't alone in the struggle for access. An estimated 15 million people in Ethiopia live with disabilities, and they are often stigmatized by society and have heightened risk of poverty. She says society assumes people with disabilities are unable to perform even the most basic tasks.
This is ridiculous, you know, just people ask you, how can you eat without seeing your mouth? They really get amazed when you do something because the initial thinking that they have is because if you have a disability, they think that you're full of disabilities.
Yetnebersh's organization, the Ethiopian Center, has sought to address these barriers through job training and publications. For example, it offers an online guide to hotels, restaurants, and offices that are accessible to people with disabilities. She also advocates for legal changes, including overturning a restriction that makes it illegal for deaf people in Ethiopia to drive.
We have 99 abilities and 1 disability, so it depends on how you view the person. Like, for example, if you see a person using a wheelchair, then if you say, oh, because he's using a wheelchair, he cannot be a doctor, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't have any relationships.
She also has a message for allies who want to help disabled people.
So far, I haven't come across a person who doesn't have any disability. So I think it's important to value the abilities and make sure that we are viewed as contributors rather than burdens. So that way people can help us to unlock our potentials, to become who we can be.
Salam Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
Very interesting story there. I think that one point, and it's also supported by the UNESCO, is that African governments allocate a significant amount of their budgets into education. But the other portion, which is a third, comes from households. So this means that families also play a major role in actually helping the disabled have a comfortable life, you know, to be able to move around and to be able to do things without always relying on the government. I remember for me in the 90s, I lived with a cousin in Kenya who was deaf. And what we did around the house, most of us, if not all of us, actually learned how to sign language. And this brought my cousin into our world. We included him in all the conversation by signing what we were saying, and we entered into his world. So I think that families can play a major part in just doing an extra something to help the disabled. And for me, I mean, it was just wonderful to be able to play just this little bit of contribution into his life, and being able to sign, it's also a skill.
When you communicate in someone's language, you speak to their heart.
That's right.
That is awesome, because I can tell you that I remember coming into grad school and I came across a disabled person. I was kind of surprised, not in a bad way, but surprised because all through the years that I went through elementary all the way to college, I had never come across any disabled person in my class. That goes to show you that there's no provision for them in schools. But I'll tell you guys something interesting. So I came across an interesting piece this week, and it's about the Mattel company. You guys all know the Mattel company, right? They make Barbie dolls. So they recently announced that they will be adding 2 more dolls to their collection.
What kind?
One would be one on a wheelchair, and the other would be one that has a removable prosthetic legs. So I think that is awesome.
That's great. Yeah, representation matters. It's really important for all of us to see ourselves reflected in everyday life. And that's why I was actually really glad to see this. You ladies have probably seen this, but it's the disability-themed emoji. So you can see that there's a guide dog. There's also a prosthetic limb. As excited as this makes me, because inclusion is important, I also kind of feel like they missed the mark. Because when you think about emojis, we use emojis to express our emotions or to, you know, if we're doing a certain activity like swimming. Like my favorite emoji is the facepalm girl. I feel like these disability emojis need to include people with disabilities doing everyday things. I would like to see a person in a wheelchair dancing. I would like to see someone with a prosthetic limb running. I'm glad that they did this, but I just feel like they could have gone an extra mile to make sure that people with disabilities are represented as they are in everyday life.
And people with disabilities are not their disability.
Exactly.
You know? You were talking about inclusion and representation. This is where the media can also play a really important role. Part of our job as journalists, and especially those of us working in television, we should know that our stories and our work should reflect the demographics of members of our audience, and people with disabilities are part of that demographic. They're part of our audience. You know, the same way that we make sure that our jobs and our work reflect the voices of women, of people of color, you know, across race and class. So I think same with people with disabilities. And when we do our stories, make sure that when we depict people or the way we portray people, it's not just in terms of what they have overcome, seeing them just as survivors, but also consider people with disabilities to be our analysts and to be our experts, you know, see that side of it all. We do the same for everything else.
It's like the hashtag nothing about us without us.
That's a fantastic hashtag, and I came across that too, and that's exactly what the Center for Disability Rights here in the United States refers to, and saying how the media can help or hurt through our reporting, how we can help or hurt the disabled community. And what's also interesting is what they call ableism. Just like we all know the term sexism and racism, they refer to it as ableism. Discrimination, overt discrimination, or just the unintentional inconsiderations that sometimes people have to endure because we don't have the knowledge. And so I really want to share this with you guys. I saw from that very website, the Center for Disability Rights here, we're going to put up that link for you, but I want you to look at this when you have a moment. It makes for pretty interesting reading, and it's also good for us to just check ourselves every now and again. They have a glossary of terms, words we should use and words we should not use, words that can be just downright offensive. You know, for instance, special needs. They just say disability. Wheelchair bound. Don't say that. Wheelchair user. Another no-no is visually impaired. Some of these are very surprising. Instead, say blind or low vision. And I think that's very important for us to know as we go on in reporting and report about this. You can read more about these terms. Go on to this website. We've got the link.
So I had no idea about special needs. This is a great resource.
I didn't either. There that I didn't know myself.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I mean, I think
thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that's right. It's really good to take a look at it and to be empowered and to be able to help people in society not to be offensive. Speaking of empowerment, after the break, we'll be introducing you to people to watch. And these people are living well beyond their physical disabilities and challenges. We'll be right back in a moment.
Welcome back. This is Our Voices, and it's time for a Women to Watch segment. Haben Girma is the first deafblind person to graduate from Harvard Law School. She advocates for equal opportunities for people with disabilities. President Obama named her a White House Champion of Change in 2013. She's at the spot on the Forbes magazine 30 Under 30 list. She travels the world and teaches clients the benefits of fully accessible products and services. Her parents are Eritrean and Ethiopian immigrants, and she grew up in California. She has resisted society's low expectations, choosing to create her own pioneering story. Girma will tell her story in a book this year.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that book.
Yeah, go Girma. Keep traveling the world.
I always love it when people defy other people's low
That's
expectations
right.
of them.
That's right.
I'm really excited for her. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah. Right.
Well, we'll also keep an eye in the sky on Eddie Ndopu, a South African who was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy at age 2, and doctors gave him 5 years to live. Well, he's now 28. Ndopu was the first African with a disability to graduate from Oxford University, and he has plans to book a flight on a commercial trip into space and deliver an address to the United Nations while he's up there. I mean, you might as well. He says he'll be advocating for the rights of young disabled people around the world. And guess what? The United Nations is game. So is MTV. They say they will document Eddie's trip later this year. Ndopu is set to meet with Elon Musk, also South African-born, the space entrepreneur and CEO of Tesla, you'll remember, and they will be discussing ways to make Eddie Ndopu's trip happen. You know, Eddie says something very interesting. He believes that disabled people will fare better in space, and this is what he wants to prove, because they have learned to navigate hostile conditions.
Right.
And he also says, you see how astronauts bounce around on the International Space Station? He says that he knows how to use his arms and legs to push off surfaces and direct his motion. So let's see if Eddie really does this. I mean, it would be fantastic.
He is the definition of thinking big.
That's right.
incredible.
I mean, okay, also, Haiti, nowadays people can just book a flight into space?
Yes, and this time it's Eddie. Never, ever say never.
That's
so
right.
who do you think deserves a shout out? Use this hashtag, VOA Our Voices, and tell us who you are watching.
Be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website, where you can find the world's top stories.
Well, we leave you with a quote from Anne Wafulu Strike, British Paralympic wheelchair racer, who was born in Mehu, Kenya, and contracted polio at the age of 2 that resulted in a later diagnosis of paralysis. The ADD International Ambassador used her voice in her 2010 autobiography entitled In My Dreams, I Dance to say, when you have a disability, knowing that you are not defined by it is the sweetest feeling.
Amazing, amazing. And that's all, folks. Thanks for watching Our Voices for this week. On behalf of the beautiful ladies of Our Voices and the Voice of America, have a good day. Thank you.